Picture this, right? You just got back from a 3-day leadership development workshop, and the company spent just a small fortune sending you there.
Oh, yeah. You stayed in the high-end hotel. You wore the little lanyard.
Exactly. You drank gallons of that, like,
Hmm.
slightly burnt conference room coffee,
Yep.
and you listened to these incredibly charismatic speakers talk about, synergy and empathetic communication and agile decision making.
Oh, and the trust exercise. You definitely did some carefully moderated trust exercise.
Right. And you took pages of meticulous notes. So now you possess this pristine, remarkably heavy binder full of laminated frameworks, and you are fired up. I mean, you are ready to transform your team.
But then,
But then it is Tuesday afternoon. You're back in your desk. Your inbox has 400 unread emails.
mm,
Two of your direct reports are having this vicious turf war over a project deadline.
and the main client is threatening to pull their entire contract by 5 o'clock.
Yes. And suddenly, all those beautiful frameworks in that heavy binder feel completely useless. I mean, you just fall right back into the exact same routine, the exact same stress responses, because the messy reality of Tuesday afternoon doesn't look anything like a tidy PowerPoint slide.
No, it really doesn't.
So welcome to Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking a stack of research centered around this really fascinating new article from the Phoenix Performance Partners to figure out exactly why traditional leadership development, well, completely fails to transfer to real work.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly common, almost universal organizational experience, right? We invest massive amounts of time and capital into these highly controlled, sterile environments,
Totally.
operating under this assumption that leadership knowledge acquired in a vacuum will somehow seamlessly map onto the absolute chaos of the actual workplace. So our mission today is to explore a radically different framework, one that takes actual messy organizational crises and turns them into the ultimate curriculum for emerging leaders.
I mean, I look at the traditional corporate reflex they describe in this research, and it just makes me think of trying to learn how to swim by reading a textbook on dry land.
That is exactly what it is.
Like, you can memorize the physics of buoyancy all day long.
Hmm.
You can study these detailed anatomical diagrams of the perfect freestyle arm stroke. You can even pass a written test on water safety.
And you feel super prepared.
Right, the theory is perfectly fine, but absolutely none of that prepares you for the physical shock of jumping into a 50-degree lake.
Yep.
The cold water hits you, your heart rate spikes, your breathing gets incredibly shallow, and suddenly you aren't thinking about, the mechanics of your elbow angle anymore. You're just thrashing around trying not to sink.
And that physical shock is exactly what traditional workshops ignore. Because we know the dry land approach isn't working, right? Because the shock of the cold water makes people instantly abandon the theory. We have to look at the reality of how organizations handle talent.
Which is usually badly.
Right. The corporate reflex is almost entirely built around removing people from the work to teach them about the work.
Which makes no sense when you say it out loud.
I know. We identify promising people, we assign them external mentors, we fly them to these 3-day transformation programs, and then we drop them right back into the exact same high-pressure ecosystem they just left.
Where absolutely nothing has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, the turf war is still happening. The client is still angry.
Nothing changes. Now, it's crucial to understand that the frameworks being taught in those workshops aren't inherently wrong.
Right, they're not bad ideas.
No, the models of communication, the conflict resolution types, they're usually highly researched, valid tools. The breakdown isn't the information itself.
So what is it?
The breakdown is that the information completely lacks a real-world stress test. Cognitive memory, which is what you use to memorize a framework in a quiet room, is entirely different from experiential memory.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. And experiential memory is what you need to navigate an actual crisis.
Yeah.
You simply cannot develop a leader in a classroom because a classroom has no stakes.
Right, because if you fail a role play exercise about giving difficult feedback to a coworker, nobody actually quits the company.
Exactly.
The client doesn't pull the $1 million account. You just, reset the scenario, get some polite applause, and try again.
Which brings us to this great quote in the source material from Red Rovins. He's the founder of action learning, which is the philosophy that underpins this entire alternative approach. He said, and I quote, "There can be no learning without action and no action without learning."
Wow. Sounds a bit like a Zen koan at first glance.
It does. It really does. But when you apply it to organizational design, it's this deceptively simple, highly radical concept. Rabimmons is arguing that leadership cannot be acquired as abstract knowledge. You cannot know leadership without doing it.
Right.
So action learning is the concept that you develop leaders by handing them real, unsolved problems entirely free of theoretical safety
Wait,
nets.
entirely free.
Yeah. The action itself is the only vehicle capable of rewiring the nervous system to handle ambiguity and stress.
Okay, I'm looking at this framework and I'm just thinking about like a CEO or a senior director listening right now. If a vital supply chain is completely broken and it's costing the company tens of thousands of dollars a day,
Uh-huh.
or a major product launch
Mm-hmm.
is just going off the rails,
Yeah.
you're telling me it's a good idea to let 3 or 4 unproven junior managers just figure it out so they can learn a leadership lesson.
Oh, no.
I mean, that doesn't sound like development. That sounds like a fast track to corporate bankruptcy. It feels incredibly reckless.
And that is the exact tension that drives companies back into the safety of the conference room. It feels reckless to hand over the keys.
Right.
But action learning is not about abandoning structure or embracing pure chaos. It's about a profound shift in where the structure is applied. You aren't removing the curriculum. You are recognizing that the work itself must become the curriculum. You don't take away the safety net entirely. You just build the scaffolding around a live burning problem rather than a simulated one.
Okay, so if I want to adopt this tomorrow, how do I actually build that scaffolding? Because, as you said, you can't just throw people into a burning building and call it a masterclass.
Right, so you start by selecting the fire itself. You need an actual unsolved organizational challenge, not a hypothetical case study from 1998 about a fictional widget factory.
God, I hate those.
We all do. It has to be a problem that is actively sitting on someone's plate, causing genuine headaches, and impacting the business right now.
Meaning, there's a real cost to not solving it.
Exactly.
Okay, so once you have that problem, you build a team.
Yes, you assemble 3 or 4 emerging leaders. These are people with high potential, but perhaps they haven't had the opportunity to run point on a crisis of this magnitude yet.
Makes sense.
You hand them the challenge, and you establish a hard, real-world deadline. But here's the mechanism that separates this from simply, delegating a task. You have to give them genuine authority.
Genuine authority.
Right. They aren't just brainstorming a list of cute ideas to pitch to a senior vice president who will then pat them on the head and make the actual decision. They must have the authority to implement the solution they design.
Man, the part that shifts this entirely for me, though, is how the team is supported. Because giving junior people a massive problem and full authority is still terrifying.
It is.
But the research emphasizes pairing this team with a coach. And the role of this coach completely flips my understanding of what a coach usually does in a corporate setting.
It's totally different. The coach's mandate is the linchpin of the entire action learning process. This person is not a subject matter expert.
Right.
They are not there to solve the supply chain issue. If the team gets stuck on a technical detail regarding, say, vendor contracts or software integration, the coach does not step in to provide the answer.
So they aren't the lifeline you call on a game show when you don't know the trivia answer.
Exactly. The coach's explicit sole mandate is to help the team reflect on how they are working together, completely divorced from what they're doing.
How, not what.
Under stress, our neurological default is to revert to our worst habits. We micromanage, we shut down, we talk over people. The coach is there to interrupt that default.
So if the team hits a wall and everyone is arguing, the coach isn't saying, hey, have you thought about restructuring the logistics pipeline this way?
No, not at all.
The coach is saying, I noticed that for the last 20 minutes, one person has been trying to suggest a new direction, but the rest of the group is completely ignoring them. Why is the dynamic in this room entirely shutting down dissenting opinions?
Yes. By asking that question in the heat of the moment, the coach forces the team to step out of the tactical execution and examine their own leadership behaviors in real time. This is where experiential memory forms. Instead of reading about active listening in a binder, they are forced to confront their failure to actively listen while the stakes are incredibly high. It rewires their behavioral reflexes right in the middle of the stress test.
It reminds me of an escape room.
Oh, an escape room, how so?
Yeah, like you and your friends pay to get locked in a room, and you have 60 minutes to solve a series of complex puzzles to get out. You don't learn how to beat an escape room by having someone hand you a pamphlet in the lobby with all the answers.
Right, that would ruin the whole thing.
Exactly. The learning The actual thrill in development only happens because you are locked in, the timer is mercilessly counting down, the pressure is real, and you are forced to figure out how to communicate with the specific personalities in that room.
Oh, that's spot on.
You figure out very quickly who delegates well, who panics and starts flipping tables, and who hyper-focuses on entirely the wrong clues. And the coach in the action learning framework is like the game master watching you through the security cameras. They will never get on the loudspeaker and tell you the 4-digit code to the padlock. But they might get on the loudspeaker and say, hey, you are all yelling at the exact same time, and no one is looking at the big picture.
The escape room is a perfect way to look at it. Because just like in an escape room, the puzzle itself almost doesn't matter.
Right.
The broken supply chain, the angry client, those are just the catalysts. It's the pressure that reveals the behavior. Solving the organizational challenge is an important operational byproduct, for sure. But the true value, the actual development engine, is the behavioral growth that only occurs under the pressure of a real timeline and shared authority.
So if the formula is really just give them a real problem, grant them authority, and use a coach to monitor the behavior, I mean, it sounds foolproof. So why isn't every major organization operating this way? What is the catch that causes this to fail?
It fails because it quietly, inevitably collapses back into what their research brilliantly terms oversight in disguise.
Oversight in disguise, meaning the authority was an illusion all along.
Precisely. Senior leaders set up the framework, they talk a big game about empowerment, they hand over the problem, but the very second the emerging leaders stumble,
Oh, here we go.
or, more commonly, the moment the team starts pursuing a solution that looks fundamentally different from what the senior leader would have done, the senior leader swoops back in.
They grab the steering wheel. Let me just reformat this slide, or let me just jump on this one client call to smooth things over.
Yep, and the moment they do that, the learning dies.
Oh, because the stakes are gone.
Exactly. If we analyze why senior leaders do this, it's deeply tied to corporate survival. Most senior leaders quietly believe they could solve the problem faster and better than the emerging leaders they just handed it to.
And they're probably right, aren't they?
In the short term, they are almost certainly right. They have a decade more experience, they have more institutional context, they could fix the supply chain faster.
But fixing it faster is a trap.
A huge trap.
By swooping in to secure a short-term operational win, they are entirely sacrificing the long-term strategic goal of team development. There's a line in the source material from Phoenix Performance Partners that just hit me hard. Every problem a senior leader solves themselves is a leader they didn't develop.
That's the core of it.
Every single time you jump in and rewrite the proposal because it's just faster to do it yourself, you are actively choosing not to develop the person who is supposed to be doing it. You are prioritizing your own comfort over their growth.
It's a really harsh mirror to look into,
Right.
but we have to dig deeper into why they prioritize that comfort. It's not just a matter of individual ego, it's a symptom of a systemic corporate culture that violently punishes mistakes.
Right.
We have to name the fear driving the senior leader. The takeover isn't actually about the spreadsheet or the client call.
No, it's about what the failure means for the person who delegated it.
Exactly. Think about a publicly traded company facing quarterly earnings pressures. If a senior vice president hands a critical multi-million-dollar project to a junior team and they deliver an outcome that is messy or late or wildly unconventional,
The CEO isn't going to yell at the junior team.
no, the CEO or the board is going to look directly at that vice president and say, why did you let this happen? Why didn't you manage this better?
Wall Street doesn't care that your junior managers were having a great action learning experience.
Good point. Wall Street definitely doesn't care about your experiential memory.
Right.
So the senior leader swoops in out of sheer self-preservation. It is driven by the fear of what an imperfect outcome might say about them.
Yes, until this systemic fear is explicitly named and managed, the emerging leader can never truly own the project. Genuine ownership means the senior leader must willingly allow the emerging leader to carry the risk of doing it entirely differently than the boss would have.
That is so hard to do. It's incredibly hard. If the senior leader requires the team to solve the problem exactly the way the senior leader would have solved it, you don't have action learning. You just have micromanagement with extra steps.
Yeah,
You are treating your emerging leaders like human remote controls.
like human remote controls.
Wow.
And the moment the senior leader steps in and overrides the team's decision, the team learns an incredibly toxic lesson.
What's that?
They learn that they don't actually have authority, that taking risks is punished, and from that day forward, they will just sit quietly and wait for instructions. You've actively trained them out of being leaders.
You've created a dependency loop. So the ultimate bottleneck to developing new leaders isn't a lack of training budget, it is the senior leader's inability to manage their own anxiety about looking bad.
So knowing this, knowing that corporate fear and ego are the main obstacles, how does a manager listening to us right now actually bypass that and put this into practice? How do you break the dependency loop this week?
Well, the research lays out a highly actionable blueprint for designing one action learning opportunity immediately. If you manage a team or have influence over a project, your assignment starts with picking a real challenge sitting on your plate today.
Not a hypothetical scenario for next year.
No, something with a real impending deadline.
But there's a crucial filter for picking this problem, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just pick any annoying task you don't want to do.
Right, no busy work. Here is the absolute key to the selection process. It must be a challenge that you do not already have a perfect answer to.
Oh,
If you already know exactly how you want the supply chain fixed or the software integrated, you cannot use it for action learning. Because if the answer is already in your head, you will inevitably manipulate the team into guessing your answer, and you will micromanage them when they deviate from it.
you'll just play that game of guess what I'm thinking.
Exactly. You have to pick something where you are genuinely unsure of the best path forward.
I love that requirement because it forces humility right from the jump. You have to admit you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a problem that genuinely stumps you. Then you identify 3 or 4 people with high potential. You hand them the challenge, but you set very clear boundaries.
Yeah, you give them a clear scope of what is in and out of bounds regarding, say, budget or legal compliance. You establish a coaching cadence, meaning you or an external coach meets with them regularly, specifically to discuss how they are functioning as a team.
Remember the escape room game master.
Exactly. You are asking about their communication breakdowns, not giving them the combination to the lock. And finally, you give them the explicit, undeniable authority to implement the answer they come up with.
And then comes the final hurdle, which sounds simple, but is probably the most mentally agonizing part of the entire process.
Stepping back.
Yeah,
The hard part isn't designing this framework. Finding the problem is easy. Assembling the team is easy. The excruciatingly difficult part for highly competent, ambitious senior leaders is sitting on their hands and watching a messy, inefficient process unfold without interfering.
just biting your tongue.
It is painful to watch a team go down a blind alley when you know it's a dead end. But letting them hit that wall and figure out how to pivot is the development. Emerging leaders do not need another expensive workshop. They don't need another pristine binder full of theories. They need real problems, and they need the genuine trust to wrestle with them.
If we pull all of this together, the through line is incredibly clear. If you want to build a resilient, adaptable team, a team that doesn't just memorize concepts but actually knows how to lead when the environment gets chaotic, you have to make a fundamental trade.
Yep.
You have to trade the sterile, predictable safety of theoretical workshops for the messy, unpredictable, stress-tested reality of actual organizational challenges. You have to stop teaching leadership in a vacuum and start handing over the work.
Which naturally leads to an important and somewhat uncomfortable question. A final thought to consider, building on everything we've just unpacked about the psychology of delegation.
Let's hear it.
If the absolute core requirement of developing capable, autonomous leaders is handing them unsolved problems, what does it mean if you look around your organization right now and realize there are no unsolved problems being handed down?
Oh, that is a chilling thought. If the pipeline of problems is empty, the pipeline of leaders is empty.
It demands serious introspection. Are you truly operating in a company that is so perfectly optimized that it has everything figured out?
Unlikely.
Or, and this is far more likely, are you in an organization where the senior leaders are quietly hoarding all the puzzles out of fear?
Wow.
Are they gripping onto every complex challenge because the corporate culture is so unforgiving that they are terrified of an imperfect outcome? Because if the puzzles are being hoarded at the top to protect egos, the talent at the bottom is slowly starving to death.
Are they hoarding the puzzles out of fear? Man, I want you to take a hard look at your own desk and your own team's workload this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Now go find a complex problem, hand it over, and most importantly, step back.